Well, welcome. Who are you and what do you do?
Hi, Roger. I'm Donnie Bryant. I am a copywriter and marketing nerd. I guess that's the best
I
the best
love
way for
that
me to
one
put
because nerd, geek, whatever fits the bill for me as well. And frankly, that was one of I'm trying to even remember where we first connected, but that was one of the things that I first saw about you is that you were reading the same kind of sources and had kind of a philosophy about copywriting and how do we connect with people and motivate them to action that was kind of from the same camp that I came from. So, in fact, let's start there. Tell me a little more about that. Let's start with copy or copywriting because as you and I have talked about before, conversation always is around content, right? And I know,
absolutely.
I think I'll let the cat out of the bag here a little bit. I know that you approach copywriting from a how am I going to have a conversation with this person? How am I going to draw them in and get them somewhere? Tell me more about how you approach that.
Uh, I think there are two schools of thought, and I'm sure you would agree. And yeah, the cat's a little bit out of the bag. When it comes to copywriting, there are those who feel like, or in any kind of advertising or marketing, let me come up with a message and yell it at the top of my lungs, and as often as I can to whoever I can, and that's the kind of thing that uh, you see at the Super Bowl. Let me come up with
Yeah,
something
exactly. If you got an
wild
extra
and
few
crazy.
million sitting around.
Next time I have $2 million that I don't need, maybe I'll get a commercial at around halftime, or not. But that's from one school, and a lot of businesses kind of go that way. A lot of them don't know better. The second school, maybe there's more than two. I just think of them as two, and the other one is, like you say, having a conversation with people about things that matter, things that we share in common. You connect with people. Maybe I'm moving forward. You connect with people over things that you share. So if my message is, I make the best steaks on the planet, me and a vegan are not going to have a good conversation, no matter how loud I'm talking, no matter how clever I make the commercial, and no matter how often they hear from me. We're just talking about two different things. So there's kind of the two. There's the dichotomy as I see it, and I approach things beginning with who am I talking to, and I think that's a conversation. I mean, that's the kind of conversation that you want to have with people face to face, in social media, in any kind of, in all of life. If the only thing you ever think about is what I want to talk about, you're going to be a lonely, a lonely person,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
a poor salesperson. You connect with people based on things that they are interested in, that you have something to contribute to.
And just out of curiosity, well, one, I entirely agree. And, I think one of the challenges when people move online, and I'm even going to put copywriting into that, right? Yesterday,
Right.
that might have been a letter that we sent through the snail mail. But now, frankly, that is email or how I post something on Twitter if responses or conversation is my interest. But I'm curious, how do you get to know somebody or how do you approach that in your context when you're talking about copywriting and presumably that's not one to one, right? Peppers and Rogers a long time ago kind of tried to popularize this idea of one to one, and we understand that. But when you and I are at a coffee shop, or in this case, Portland and Chicago, and and we're using Google Hangouts, I still know who I'm speaking to. How do you tackle that when you move that into copywriting, where presumably there's going to be one side of the conversation that's happening in your writing, and just how do you get inside the head of the person you're trying to connect with?
Uh, it takes some work and some research. It really depends on what you're talking about. Of course, no matter what you're doing, it depends on uh, the context of the conversation that you want to have. I try to, whoever the client is, we try to find out what they're trying to accomplish as far as their product or service. And then you go and you do some research. You hang out where these people hang out. You kind of read, or you don't necessarily have to read everything they read, but find out the kind of things that they read, the kind of things that they're interested in. It can involve surveys, although, I've just explained and made a big ruckus about how you can't necessarily trust surveys because they're often very biased in the way they're set up,
Hmm.
and the things that people say are not
Don't
necessarily.
lose that thought, by the way, because whether we're talking about copywriting for marketing, which is your trade,
Hmm.
or you're a solopreneur and you just need to get the word out. I hate that phrase.
Right.
Right, which gets back to the shouting louder issue.
Sure. Hmm.
Or you're a trainer, because one of the things I find in the world of learning and development is oftentimes people in training think it's all about the content, and they
Sure.
miss some of that connection, as in how do I get people to show up wanting to engage instead of blasting at them. So keep
Yes.
going.
Okay. Um, so I was saying that what people say is sometimes different from what they will do. So you observe the market as much as possible. So it's important to know who you're talking to, which is it goes back again to the shouting thing. If you just feel like I need to shout so that somebody will hear me, or I need to make a very funny commercial so that somebody will laugh and hopefully form a positive impression or have a positive feeling towards my product. Maybe it's kind of a general way of approaching it. If you stand in the playground and shout, "Who wants to be my friend?" Well, you could do that, but how about you grab a football and say, "Who wants to play a game of football?" There's probably a lot of girls who would say those boys are going to go over there and be funny. Maybe I'm being sexist now, but but there's a bunch of boys that say, "Yeah, I'm in," and even if they don't know you yet, you have something in common. I like football. You like football, and we can start from there. So it really is about research. Most of the companies that I deal with are somewhat established. They're not coming up with a new idea and have not yet found out if there's a market for it or not. So for me, is we talk about the experiences they've had in the past and uh, their current and past customers, what kind of things have been successful and unsuccessful, and if we can talk to those people, we can find out the drivers behind purchase decisions and the relationship, etc. So it's a research thing, and that's sometimes the boring part, but it's absolutely crucial.
Right. Well, I don't find it boring, but well, in fact, that's a good segue to my next question, because one of our opportunities online is to, in a sense, used the term research. I call it, in part, it's research. Sometimes it's just a function of learning to listen,
Yes.
albeit with a pair of digital ears. And I
Sure.
know you're active with social media, and I'm always careful with that because lots of people use it as an advertising, push crap at you kind of medium
Sure.
instead of a relational development medium. But just out of curiosity, how do you approach social media, and does that factor into how you, in a sense, research or listen to a given customer segment?
Sure. I spend, I just had a call with one of my masterminds yesterday morning, and one of the guys said, "Donnie, you're everywhere. I see you everywhere." And so it seems like I spend a lot of time on social media. I don't spend a lot of time there, but I definitely use that to find out, especially Twitter. I don't spend much time on Facebook at all. Twitter and Google Plus, you find out a lot about the things that are catchy, the ideas that are catchy, the things people are talking about, and you can kind of stalk people in a non-creepy way.
Yeah. No,
um,
exactly right.
yeah, that's kind of listening is the right word. Research is like applied listening or intentional looking for somebody to listen to.
Yes.
Um, so listening, but directionally and intentionally, with a purpose.
Well, that's actually a great distinction. I think I like the way that you put that, because in we listen in different ways, right? I use TweetDeck to
Yeah.
screen my 20,000 Twitter followers
I
down
don't know
to
how you
about
do it, by the way.
2,500 that I want to pay more attention to, right?
Right.
But the way you just expressed that with applied listening, or maybe you're going at it with a particular purpose, I think is a great distinction. And in fact, let me harken back just to what you said just about a minute ago about other people saying they see you everywhere. That, I think, is really darn catchy, right? I mean, when people call me and I say, "How did you find out about me?" "Oh, I've seen you around," right? I mean, that happens a lot.
Right.
I've been doing what I've been doing for a long time, and I think of it as presence, right? If you always make coffee in the office instead of walking down to the coffee shop, then nobody who's between your office and the coffee shop is going to get to know you.
Right.
And so if it doesn't, like you say, you don't have to spend a huge amount of time on Google Plus or Twitter or something like that to be able to have presence. Tell me more about how you approach that.
I have a little bit of both. I share a lot of content of my own, so some people will think of it as pushy. I don't intend for it to be pushy. And honestly, I almost never have anything for sale, even when you see, a bunch of my tweets and it's going to my website or going to a website that I'm posting on. I'm not selling anything. I'm creating I'm sharing information I think is valuable and hopefully a little bit entertaining. But when it comes to, especially on Google Plus and on LinkedIn, I spend a lot of time trying to add value to other people's conversations. So sure, I look like I'm everywhere. I'm talking to people who are who are centers of influence, or they're maybe the people I'm talking to are also interested in what this, in this other person. So the conversations that I'm getting involved in, I'm touching on conversations that are kind of active. I try very hard to support people that I like and people who I'm, my friends, my colleagues, or if they're current clients, of course, and try to keep a little bit of extra attention on them as well.
Right.
So for me, it's a lot. I automate as well. Most of my tweets on Twitter are sent out automatically. I don't spend a whole lot of time doing that. Only when I come across something really interesting, and even then, it's probably not. I'm going to tweet it right now. I'll try to put some context around it.
What do you use for automation?
I have a Hootsuite, and then I have like Tweet Old Post, which just automatically grabs from my blog post that I have there. That one is super easy. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to pre-schedule it. It kind of randomly chooses.
I don't know that. Tweet Old Post?
Yeah. So if you just go into the plugin, search for plugin, Tweet Old Post is what it's called.
Oh, it's a WordPress plugin.
WordPress plugin, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's that I like that because like I said, it doesn't require any thought from me at all. Just automatically tweets stuff. I don't blog very frequently, like 3 times a month on my own site. So that kind of works for me. And then Hootsuite, upon occasion, I've used. I can't think of the other one.
I'm a fan of Buffer.
I keep hearing about Buffer. I got to go check it out.
Yeah, well, you can get a free version for, it'll hook you up to LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter for one account each for free, and then I pay the $10 a month for the pro version, which has some additional things, and I think it's a great $10 well spent, because, I'm not here to sell you Buffer. It's a great tool. Besides being able to, you can schedule, but it will auto sense what the interval is or should be for you. So if you say I want it to be 4 times a day, it'll kind of analyze and auto schedule those out. So you don't even have to go in and pick the calendar time for that to go out. And Safari and Google Chrome plug in. So if you're on a website, you can just hit Buffer and it just adds it to the buffer. In fact, that to me is one of the challenges with sharing. And I love the way that you put it, because in fact, and let me draw out this distinction for our audience. You're sharing in a giving heart, right? So I know, because I follow your stuff, I know that you're not selling. And the way that I can tell, and this is where I start to think that we can actually connect with people authentically, even in a digitally extended world, you're given from your heart. That doesn't mean you didn't ever say, hey, here's my new ebook, and would you give me $10 or whatever, right? But that's few and far between. I realize you're not advertising at me. By and large, you're sharing things that are of interest and of value. And if you and I have a mutual interest in something, then of course we're gonna connect, and I'm gonna be more interested in what you bring to the table. But in fact, describe for me. You spend a little more time with Google Plus and LinkedIn, correct?
Sure. That's correct.
So one of the things, in fact, let me just start with a compliment. One of the things that you do well is extend the dialogue, right? Just a comment or adding something to that. And I think that's really powerful in part because that also comes from your giving heart, which is that you are contributing, and that contribution is by being participatory, not asking of something of someone, right? If you just say a great post, that's a nice way of reaching out and touching someone, which I would argue is actually highly relational, and that's one of the things that I think you do really well.
Thank you for your kindness, by the way. I think that's so important because if you're like me, you don't like to share something you think is valuable and hear crickets. You've gone 2 days and said, I thought I could have sworn this was brilliant. I just knew that my audience was going to get benefit from it, and maybe they have because LinkedIn doesn't necessarily say there's 50 people who've read this and in their mind said I like this.
Yeah.
You don't get statistics like that. The only way you'll know is if somebody says great post, or if they like it and share it. Whenever possible, if I can think of something clever to say, I want to go even further, and hopefully we'll say, yeah, that point number 3 was a really good one, or I don't know if I agree with the 5th point in that article. I come from this perspective, which expands on it and makes it extra intriguing for somebody else, because now you see that there's, you kind of see some communicate or some conversation around that topic, so somebody else can say, oh, this must be somewhat valuable because there's people having a conversation about it. And I think if there's controversy, this person said this, Donnie doesn't necessarily agree, then it's a little bit extra intriguing. But the other thing about it is on LinkedIn, in your feed, you automatically, the default setting is popular stuff kind of comes to the top, it rises to the top. Facebook is the same. If you say something and nobody interacts with it or nobody engages with it, then it's quickly disappearing. And no matter how valuable and interesting it is, it could be life-changing, literally life-changing, and nobody may see it. So if I can help that be a little bit more visible to other people, I trust that you're sharing good stuff with your audience. As a matter of fact, I know that you are. So if I can help keep that alive a little longer, or let my audience in on what you're sharing, then I think that's what social media is for. We're not just here to talk about what we had for breakfast. Although sometimes I like to see the pictures of nice food and things like that. But that's the least important aspect of social media, other than maybe complaining. But you say, these are tips on. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to validate what you just said. Why do people show something where they've got this killer-looking plate of food, and they take a picture of it and put it up on Instagram and post it on Facebook or something like that? And yet I might even argue that serves a purpose, because if you and I were sitting across the table from each other, the actual physical table,
sure,
and I had this killer meal, or you had this killer meal in front of you, that's a shared experience between us, right? Oh my gosh, this is the best pad thai I've ever had, right?
Right.
And in a sense, if I do that online and you say, oh, that looks great, we're sharing an experience. And I think that's one of the things that people miss with the relational aspect of, like, why the hell would anybody care what I had for lunch, right? Well, no, many people don't care what you had for lunch, right? Being interested in other people is actually probably the better way to get their attention. But that is part of the relational experience. And I think it comes back to, purpose and intent and that kind of thing.
Definitely.
But here's the other part of the exclamation point behind something I think you do well. And I don't even know if you intend to do this or you just naturally do it because you're a thinker and a word guy. But I like what you just described. My analogy is like an annotated bibliography.
Mm-hmm.
Where a bibliography is just this listing of book, citation, 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 whereas an annotated bibliography, for those of you who maybe didn't like that part of English in college, is where there's some additional descriptor of what that book or that source was about, right? And to your point, and I'm going to use my words to reflect back to you what I think I heard you say, if you see a post that is 5 ways to launch widgets, and you turn around and share that, but you add something to it, like, I particularly like point number 3, or good points except for number 4. You're adding something to the conversation, and more importantly, for the people that follow you on whatever link, LinkedIn or whatever, that you're adding something to their context for how to approach that.
Right.
Right? It's not even just the author who you shared, which is powerful into it in and of itself, but it is your addition to that that adds additional flavor or context or something that improves the meaning to the person who just saw your Twitter feed or wherever you posted that. Do you do that intentionally, just out of curiosity, or is that just something that naturally comes out of you?
I think I do it on purpose. I think you've said it in a way that you've put words around it that I would not have thought to to say. Um, and as a matter of fact, I think the last time we spoke on the phone, the way that you said it, it crystallized for me maybe what I'm kind of naturally intending to do, but you made it clear, the full extent of what I'm doing, which is, like you said, to add the flavor. This is a little Donnie seasoning on this.
Yeah,
on this.
Donnieism, that works.
I think it's because like you say, there's probably 50 people sharing any given good piece of content, or 50,000 people. Why does Donnie think it's interesting, or why does Roger think it's interesting? The people who are paying attention to you care what you think is interesting about it, and you can make them a little more interested in it by sharing what you think is a particularly interesting or controversial or idiotic part of it. My last newsletter, not to promote my newsletter at all, but the subject line when I sent it out said, the Harvard Business Review sends out crap sometimes. And I was disagreeing with a few of the points in an article that it was actually written last year, but Harvard Business Review rehashed it earlier this month. And it wasn't a bad article. But there were some points that I disagreed with that I thought were important. So you could say, oh, that was a great article, but Donnie's take on it is these 3 points are wrong and harmful for you to, and this is why I think so. And I took 1,000 words to say it, which was, some people tell me I'm too long-winded, and maybe that's true. But I think it was fairly valuable.
You're a good storyteller.
Thank you, sir.
And you know what? And this comes from a guy that's dabbled in copywriting to a guy that's like the real pro in copywriting. But it's not about length so much as effectiveness, right? There was a whole movement about how a sales letter shouldn't be more than a paragraph.
Right.
And when at the end of the day, if you send out a 9-page sales letter, I'm just using that as an analogy.
Sure.
And only 10% of the people read it, but they actually did something with it. What do you want? Do you want somebody to take action, or do you want somebody to read it?
Right. I had this one of my subscribers sent me a response saying, it was a great article, but it was too long. And then this is a couple of newsletters ago, and then for this one in particular, he sent one back saying this was great. So you're still reading. The fact that every one of my newsletters is 4 times longer than you want to read, he's still reading them, still benefiting from them. So I think he probably would like to be in a hurry. But it's gratifying to know that he's not bailing out just because I'm taking a little bit more of his time. And I got another person who said this is the best newsletter I've read in a long time. So that's not me trying to brag, but just saying, sometimes we feel like we have to put everything into a tweet-sized package.
Yes.
But if you've got something important to say or something interesting to say, or if you're taking a picture of your breakfast, but my relationship with you is such that I care, the length doesn't matter so much as the fact that you and I are connecting, like this conversation is about. I'm interested in what you have to say. I'm interested in who you are as a person. There are some people who will read an email from you every single day and relish every bit of it. And just because of the relationship you have with them and the fact that you're adding value to their life all the time, or you're giving them perspectives that help them in their lives or help them enjoy their lives more. And they're not saying, oh, he's always emailing me. He's always, tweeting 10 times an hour. If it's valuable, it's just like your wife. Your wife can, say she can talk to you all day. And because you love her and because you value her perspective, her opinion, and her feelings, you're not saying, oh, she never shuts up. But on the other hand, some random person comes up to you and starts talking gibberish, or whatever. Even if it's not gibberish, you're not vested in that relationship in the same way. So it's kind of a twofold thing: adding value and then building a relationship where people feel connected to you, and people they get something out of it. So yeah, I care about your breakfast. If I care about you, sure I do, and I don't feel like it's a waste of my time because we can connect over that shared experience, as you called it. I like eggs, you like eggs, or I hate eggs, you like eggs. But you're bringing it up, and that's a point of connection, whether we're agreeing or disagreeing.
Right.
This is what I have for breakfast, and I said, well, you should have had Tabasco sauce on those eggs. That's how it would have been more
Dang
tasty
straight.
for you.
Always Tabasco on the eggs.
I love Tabasco on eggs, or
Me
popcorn.
too.
As strange as that might sound,
I'm
I
gonna
like
have to
Tabasco.
try that.
It's
Well,
quite good.
so we've talked about copywriting. We've talked about social media in the context of connecting. Do you approach social media in a way where you have your copywriter hat on, or are you being conversational and this is just what comes out of Donnie when you write a new Google Plus post?
I'm pretty much always me. I don't operate in separate modes. Maybe that's not exactly true. But between copywriting is part of all of that, or my training in copywriting, my mindset as a copywriter impacts all of those. Yeah, it's a tweet, but I have the same line of thinking that I would have if I were writing that 9-page sales letter you were talking about. I just got to squish it down.
Well, let me rephrase the question
Okay.
even. Maybe let me frame it up this way. If someone else listening to this is not a copywriter,
Okay.
but you wanted to say, here is what I've learned. Maybe it's a tip, or here's an approach, or a strategy, or if you were sitting next to somebody who goes, man, I'm just not sure I get this social media thing, or really, do I really need an email newsletter, or whatever? What would you be saying to them if they were listening in?
It's in today's environment, like you said, it's a digital society. We're hyper connected. We don't really have the option to, I don't think, unless we've got a really nice store on a popular street, we don't have the option to not connect with people on purpose. We don't have an option not to show our personality on purpose. So in whatever way you decide to communicate that, I think social media is important because that's where your audience is. I think email is very valuable because if you can win your way into somebody's inbox where they don't mind you being there, you've accomplished something pretty awesome.
Yes.
And then, like I said, I have 1,000. You've given me the permission to use 1,000 words to tell you something, rather than hoping that you see my one paragraph on Google Plus or on Facebook. So connecting is essential. Communicating those shared values and those shared experiences is very important. So you have to figure out how to do that when you're going on social media or whatever. It has to be, you have to communicate something that's of value to the people who you want to reach. We don't, like I said, if you're a steakhouse, the vegans don't have to pay attention to you. It's okay. It's okay. They're never going to buy from you anyway. Hopefully they'll like you as a person, but you're not going to lose any sleep over the fact that they're not subscribing to your feed. They don't care about your YouTube page.
Right.
That's okay.
Well, let me ask you to nudge you even in another direction,
Sure.
because somebody listening to this, hopefully, or likely, if they're part of my audience, is an employee inside of an organization where their need is not how do I build an audience to sell them something, because meaning for like a solopreneur would need to sell their products or services.
Sure.
But there is that same kind of need for, in a sense, inside the company, social presence and getting someone else's attention and building relationship, albeit sometimes at a distance, through an internal social network like Yammer, or an internal quote-unquote website like SharePoint.
Sure.
Or something where, in a sense, they're doing the same thing, right? There's 50,000 employees here. I need to have a name for myself inside this organization. Some of that's how I share on an internal social network or what I post. So in a sense, that same process of outside in concentric circles. How do I get attention? How do I build relationship? How do I use media as part of reaching and teaching and leading? And with that as a context, How do you think about, or how do you approach the combination of media types? Like, how do I publish something out there socially versus what's that next level of people who subscribe and therefore give me permission to drop something in their inbox, or they know me well enough so that if I call them, they actually pick up the phone instead of letting it go to voicemail?
That's a very good question. Maybe one I haven't thought out very in depth. You know, probably in an internal. It all goes back to knowing what you want to accomplish, and knowing who it is that you want to influence, who your ideal audience would be if you're
Well,
trying
I
to.
don't ask that just in the context of just the internal folks,
Okay.
but I see a parallel of, we'll call it these, broadening concentric circles, right? I've got my boss and the team that I work on, and then the division that I work in, and then, but I happen to know what I was thinking of when I asked you that. Your process of thinking about marketing in terms of how do I get attention and get somebody to take action is actually something that people do inside of organizations as well. I spoke in Boise last fall, and a guy comes up to me at the end of the day and he says, "Hey, I love all of this, what you're saying. I work in a company that, in his case, was like one of the largest banks in the world, and we got 50,000 employees just in North America, let alone and it's a global bank." He says, "I've got this same problem inside of the company." Right? Somebody else in another division who won't return my call, or how do I build a brand for myself inside of the company? His need, in a sense, was marketing himself inside the organization, just like you help people market outside of the organization, was the parallel that I was drawing.
I see.
So you don't have to say, "Hey, I have experience of how I did this when I worked at Microsoft," but I think it's the same kind of process, which is, and I think it's something that you think about a lot, because you're thinking about, how do I take somebody who, from they don't know about me to they do know about me to they've given me some kind of permission to continue to contact them.
Sure.
That was my kind of long-winded way of saying, I think what you do is actually very parallel to what that they also experience.
Yeah, it's all a matter of connection. So we're staying on topic here. I think it people. And if you're talking about trying to influence your boss, we sometimes think of our boss as some elevated sort of being. So maybe not, but you kind of naturally feel you're a subordinate, they're a superior, but they're human. They have the same kind of needs and interests as any other person does, and they probably have desires that you can relate to. They want to be safe in their employment and in life in general. Security is important, and they want to be happy, and they want to be healthy, and they want to feel important. They want to feel special. All of those things are, depending on where you are, depending on the context, are things that you can appeal to. Now, how do you? And actually, I worked at Kmart. This is 7 years ago. And there was just, it was kind of the same thing. We didn't have an internal social network. But how do you differentiate yourself from a sea of assistant managers, which is what we had? I don't know what happened. We were in the midst of a huge, additional. They were adding so many assistant managers and having us put out fires all over the place. So somehow, and that's literally what they called us: go here, go do that. But how do you differentiate yourself from anybody else? It's important, because guess what? I don't want to be in this situation for life. I found out sooner or later that I would never be a store manager. It wasn't a task that I could accomplish on terms that I was comfortable with. But how do I differentiate myself? And it goes to being able to add value to somebody else. That's basically what it's about. So I had a great relationship with a lot of the store managers for that the firefighter mentality. If you're in trouble, Donnie will come and help. So it wasn't so much about content, but it was about me fulfilling something that they had need of, me being available for them to help them in a time of need. I had a great relationship with the district manager, who actually stole me from my previous employer because he liked the way I took care of him in a selling situation. But with him, it was primarily when he needed something done, he'd probably call around, But if he called me, I never gave him excuses. I would always say yes. I'll figure out a way. It seems impossible. I'll figure out a way to do this. So for him, it was me. He needed to know that he was able to get something accomplished. I'm a boss. I don't want to have to beat you up, but I will if I need to. Well, he didn't have to beat me up. He didn't have to follow up with me 20 times to see if the job got done. So I'm adding value to his position because he has a little bit of extra free time, not having to follow up with me all day or hold my hand to get something done. Right. I think that's true in anything. For you to add value to somebody else, say if you know a way to save them time, even if it's like an internal thing. That was the job that the district manager stole me from. I used to send little internal emails. These are tips that I found at work, and the operations manager at that company said you should print these up and share them with the group because they're very, very helpful, very useful, and everybody should learn them. But for me, these are 5 tips I found to help you get more product on the peg hooks in the home repair aisle. And this is something I found that's successful, and I can help you out. That could be media. That could just be a conversation. When people know that you're there for them, people know that you have a perspective that's helpful or interesting. People care about that. Nobody likes going to work and having a horrible time. Nobody likes running a business and not being able to figure out how to make anything happen. And nobody likes having, a social situation where nobody understands them. So if you can touch people I think it's all internal. It's all internal. If I can touch you emotionally somehow, or if I can add value to your life by helping you accomplish something that, again, internally you value, then you connect. I don't know if that answers the question at all.
No, well, absolutely. And in fact, since I've had the benefit of sitting here listening to you and thinking, let me reflect it back to you. Okay. So I'm a fan of saying that the challenge in a new media world is that we will continue to experience deficits in attention and meaning and connectedness or trust. And you actually just hit on all 3 of those in describing what it was that you do, right? How do you cut through the noise? Well, be interesting. How do you establish some kind of a connection? You be useful,
right?
And how do you develop influence, right? I like the way John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. It's not a title. It's the fact that people trust you in some way or another. And you described that as well, where the relational part of someone finding value in you was because you are giving value to them, right? That's in fact relationship.
Right.
We're talking about professional relationship as opposed to personal relationship, which probably has other dimensions. But at some point, I find you interesting, so I start paying attention. Oh, that was useful. That email was useful. You should turn around and share that out to somebody else. I start paying attention to the emails you send because the last one that you sent was useful as opposed to selling me something. And now I figure out that you're not only interesting and useful, but I can trust you. That improves your ability to be influential and get things done, and it's kind of a go-giver mentality.
Right. I think that maybe that's the best way of saying it. It's the best advice I've ever heard from anybody about anything is just it, and it is all encompassing. It is not about you. You got a job, yeah, you're working to pay for your own bills, but you're not primarily there for selfish reasons. You shouldn't have a selfish mentality. You should be trying to improve the situation you're in. You should be trying to improve your coworkers' lives, your superiors' lives, and help them to be all that they can be. And I found, in my days as an employee, I usually was able to advance. I never became a CEO any place or anything like that. But because I don't mean this to sound braggadocious. I'm very much and very really genuinely trying to look out for other people, help other people, and like I said, I don't make excuses, which is nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. Why did
Exactly.
this happen? Well, because it rained, and the rain, nobody cares. Like I fell short. I didn't get it done, but I would give everybody else the opportunity to make an excuse, whatever the case, because if people feel like you're coming down on them, they don't like you. But anyway, it's about giving. It's about trying to. I sent other emails not to be famous, not even to get the boss's attention. I don't think I even sent it to the boss, but he finds out about it because I found that this works, and you can go and do it. And I found that this does not work. Avoid that at all costs. And I think I may have had trust at the time. It was primarily me sharing with people to help them do better at their jobs. If I made dumb mistakes, you don't have to make them. If I found something that works, you don't have to keep searching for something. You can if you want, but this is something that works. Build on that. And so coming from a place of, it's not about me. This is about us as a team. This is about you, making the most out of your experience and building on your strengths as much as possible and learning from my experience, more than anything else. So that sort of thing. I think we think about marketing as, what's special about me? I need to make everybody fall in love with me. That's not so much it. What you need to do is add value to somebody else. They're going to love you based on what you do for them, not so much on what you think is great about you. As an employee, it's the same thing. What your boss wants you to make him look good. Your boss wants you to accomplish his tasks, his goals, and follow his directions. And if you think, well, I need a paycheck, that's all. I'm only here to do that. Well, you will get a paycheck, but add value to somebody else, and you're much better off. Plus, you're usually happier.
Well, and that is, in fact, probably the irony, right? The distinction, right? I mean, a huge chunk of marketing or positioning or branding, or we'll just kind of use all those words, lump them into some kind of general category. But the thing that many or most of us need, even if we're just employees, is some form of distinction because we want to feel valuable.
Yeah.
The irony of which is that, as you just described, it's not because I tell you how awesome I am.
Right.
And in fact, the process of you being useful is itself interesting and useful and trust building. And I like to wrap that up in the word experience. You're actually stringing along these various moments of experience that give me insight into who you are and why I might want to pay attention to you and trust you. In fact, as we were getting ready for hopping on this hangout, I was thinking, sometimes I have a jacket around the office. I just moved my office, so I don't have one here. I'm in this T-shirt. For those of you who might be on listen only right here, I have a T-shirt on that says Memphis Recording Service. Nice. Which I bought when I was in Memphis, Tennessee, and that was the original name of what is now known as Sun Studios, which is where Elvis first recorded, and then Carl Perkins and lots of the classic old rock and roll greats. And so it's this kind of classic half-century-old recording studio. And why do I buy a T-shirt? Because it's part of the experience. It's part of my little hanging my hat on something going, I was there.
Right.
Well, it's a little slight stretch as an analogy, but what you're talking about is you coming into contact with other people online via your copywriting or your marketing newsletter or your Google Hangout or what you post on LinkedIn or the email that you send to your fellow assistant managers years ago at Kmart. In part is saying, how do I be purposeful about giving? And we string together these moments of experience that add up to, what is Donnie's brand? Donnie talks about this. He likes this. He's useful for that. Oh, I can trust Donnie on this. And I think that's probably a good summation, probably, of all of the what it is that we're talking about with regard to content, conversation, and using copy as part of the connecting process, because it doesn't really depend on the channel, even though we probably should embrace multiple channels. It comes back to heart.
Yeah.
And it's really tempting when you're feeling down or you need to close some business so you can feed your kids or whatever that is. It's really tempting to want to tell you all about me.
Yeah.
So speaking of talking about somebody, let's talk about you for a second to as a wrap up here. Tell me or tell our audience where they can get a hold of you. What would you point them to? Your blog, your website, your newsletter, and what are they going to find there? Why might they want to go?
Yeah. I, as my buddy
This is
said,
your
I'm kind
opportunity to talk about yourself, by the way.
of well, hopefully this conversation has created context where there are people who are interested. They may find me useful, and they can
Absolutely.
trust me a little bit. And I'm borrowing trust from you and your eloquence. You know, I'm always a little smarter when I get done talking to you, so I appreciate I appreciate that. My website is kind of less like my home, my headquarters, whatever you want to call it. Like I said, I don't blog a whole lot, but you'll kind of be able to find out where else I'm at from there, which is Donnie-Bryant.com. Donnie with an IE. So you can sign up for my newsletter.
DONNIE, DONNIE hyphen Bryant, BRYANT.com.
That's correct.
All right.
Because Donnie Bryant, without a hyphen, I think is a dentist in Arkansas, if I'm not mistaken. So you
You
can
are a
go.
heck of a lot more fun than a dentist.
I hope
No
so.
offense to the dentists out there listening to this.
Well, I don't know about this website. So you can sign up for my newsletter there. It's about once a week. I'm not as consistent as I wish I was. Like I said, very
Who
little
is?
selling. Yeah, you're right. Like I said, I'm kind of in different places. That's where I would direct anyone who wants to find me. What will you find there? I talk about things that are interesting to me and nerds like me. So I'm talking about marketing, but it's kind of from a perspective. I like to look at things psychologically whenever possible. I like to poke fun at people. I like to tip sacred cows and things like that. So if you're really conservative, and I mean, there's no cussing and anything like that. But if you don't ever want to be stretching your thinking, you may not want to go there. But I try to help people think of things in a way that will help them expand their influence. Well, even if you're not an entrepreneur or solopreneur, it'll hopefully help you think about how to communicate with other people in a way that will move them and get them to to understand you and take action on what you're saying. So
Which is which is useful even if you're not a marketer or a copywriter or thinking about direct response. The rather ironic part of all of this, and maybe I'll use this as a wrap up, is that in fact, if you're trying to get somebody else to take some action, even if that's making sure they come to your webinar or join you for a team meeting that isn't mandated by the president of the company or whatever that is, we're all in the communication and influence business. And in fact, that's one of the things that I appreciated about Donnie when we first connected, how many years ago it was. Found out he was reading some interesting stuff, and as you say, like to tip the occasional sacred cow. And that's actually one of the things that I love about you. And I think for those of you who are watching and or listening, I think that's one of the things that you will appreciate about him as well. Donnie, where can they follow you on Twitter or LinkedIn or Google Plus? Do you have a preference there?
Yeah, Twitter is probably the most fun for me. Like I said, I don't spend a lot of time on any of them, but Twitter has a special place in my heart with a love-hate thing. I'm at Donnie Bryant, Jr., Donnie Bryant Jr. Simple enough. Too long, I should change it, but whatever. And they're all kind of the same. That would be the place where you'll get most of my interesting stuff. Probably comes through there. Like I said, I think my newsletter has the most interesting stuff, but that's only occasional, like about once weekly. Twitter, I share a lot of stuff, or I'll share a lot of Roger stuff, or maybe not a lot, but occasionally Roger stuff and a lot of things that I think are interesting and more eloquent than I would say, so I'll just retweet them from there. So that's probably the best place. I like Google Plus too, which is, I have no idea what my thing is there.
Well, they can find you.
But if you just just search Donnie Bryant, and probably, other than the dentist, I don't know how many there are.
Well, Donnie, appreciate you taking the time to give of yourself today here on this Hangout. For the rest of you out there, one of the things that I would encourage you to do would be to make sure that you go touch one person online or off today, make a connection, make a difference in somebody's life, and that will serve you well as you reach, teach, and lead. Roger Courville here on the connectorship angle. Over and out. See you next time.